Hi, John. How are you today?
I'm good. Good morning. How you doing today?
I'm good. I know you know what the weather is because you're here in Milwaukee, so we're looking out the windows at the same weather. Pretty nice day, actually.
Yes, through the amazement of technology, we can do podcasts in the same city, miles away.
Right. We don't have to be 1,200 miles apart.
That's right. That's right.
What would you like to start with?
The FAT Coalition, who we've mentioned many, many times, issued a press release on a U.S. Court of Appeals decision upholding the Corporate Transparency Act. So that happened late yesterday. It's the Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. It reversed a lower court decision, finding in favor of the CTA. And quotes from the FACT Coalition included Congress already gave our country's law enforcement and national security officials the tools they need to address money laundering through shell and front companies. It's long past time that we empower them to start using these tools to protect our communities, unquote. Everybody knows the Treasury earlier this year eliminated the requirement for domestic entities to file. So this is a victory for the constitutionality of CTA. From a practical standpoint, I don't know where this goes next.
Yeah, well, there's two choices procedurally. The government could appeal to the Supreme Court, which would then decide if they want to take the case or not. They could drop it, saying, well, it doesn't have a practical effect. They could be influenced by it to actually think about revising the changes they made. I think right now the likelihood of that is zero. But I think it's interesting because we saw a couple other things where shell companies were a particular key factor. So TracFin, which is the French national FIU, issued guidance on detecting illicit shell companies just in the last couple of days. They highlighted some key traits of shell companies: continuous renewal of legal entities and bank accounts, a lack of real economic activity, and fast and numerous fund transfers, known in the payment space as velocity. And they issued what they called warning criteria to identify shell companies. I think in the US, we often call those red flags. Same thing, though. Companies recently established and or the manager's profile seems inconsistent with the position. The same manager owns multiple companies. The company's corporate purpose is vague, import, export, or something like that, or indicates a sector exposed to fraud or undeclared work. A significant volume of transactions, rather, for a recently established company. The speed of credit and debit flows and outbound flows to companies unrelated to the sector of activity or to entities in foreign countries. A reminder from TracFin to companies and others in France, but also important reminder for all of us.
FATF yesterday issued their mutual evaluation of Belgium. According to the description, the system is technically largely aligned with FATF recommendations, but significant improvements are still needed to improve the effectiveness of the measures in some areas, including relation to rules regarding virtual assets. But relevant to what you just said about TracFin, the section on beneficial ownership, just two quick bullet points. Belgium has a general understanding of the money laundering and terrorist financing risks to which legal persons and legal arrangements are exposed, which should be further developed. And the creation of beneficial owner register has enabled the country to expand its multi-pronged approach to accessing information on beneficial owners. And it's a useful tool to accessing the necessary data. Interesting reference because, as we know, the U.S. is going to be shortly, I guess it's already started, the throes of their evaluation and what FATF says regarding our lack of strong beneficial ownership requirements, given what we just said, is going to be interesting.
Yeah. And the Belgium mutual evaluation was done under the new regime. So
Right.
we're starting to see the first reports come out. Related to that, Moneyval, which is one of the 9 FATF-style regional bodies, announced that its evaluation of Latvia is complete, but that the report issuance has been a little bit delayed because of working through the process between Moneyval and FATF. But we're shortly should see another report done under the new regime. John, I know there was one more thing about FATF. There was a nice piece put out by FATF related to the mutual evaluation process.
And it was interesting, as I was looking at it, I thought, not sure that we mentioned this last week. We had not, because it came out after we recorded. So yes, they have on their website, they give you an outline, a chart of how countries' defenses against illicit finance are assessed. Again, as you just said, it's under a new system, and they remind everybody that these are in-depth peer reviews that look at countries' laws and regulations, and that the countries must demonstrate that they have an effective framework, which wasn't the case before. And they defined effectiveness as the core of the on-site visit, where experts review evidence that the country's measures work and deliver the right results. And of course, there's also technical compliance. They have a chart that walks you through how you set up the peer review process. They have something called a desk-based review, and then on-site, and then obviously the response. So for those of you that are following any of the evaluations, this gives you a good sense and insight into the comprehensiveness of this process.
And it also reflects, with this new regime, a change in the timing. Many of the mutual evaluations in the past have been done on a 10-year cycle. They're now moving to a 6-year cycle. And the evaluations were generally mapped out to take 18 months, and now they've sped up to 16 months. I think there's recognition that a good look more often is probably a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Our friends at Charity and Security Network, in conjunction with Berkeley Law, their human rights clinic, have just issued a report. It's Domestic Oversight of Counterterrorism Measures. This report's from November, but it was just released. It's a 50-page document. They walk through understanding the oversight of the counterterrorism measures. What are the legal basis for those things? How do they work? And obviously, what's very important from our perspective is their conclusion. And we've heard from the Charity and Security Network folks many times that they are continually concerned about what they see as, I won't even say overreach, but the unintended impacts. So part of their conclusion says that it's well documented that the measures, counterterrorism measures, impact civil space. And the interviews that they did, stakeholders described impacts that cut across financial, reputational, operational, and legal domains. They talked about some of the things they've seen. Existing models that they've referenced, including in Australia, the UK, and Norway, do provide what they call helpful starting points, but will need to be remodeled from their perspective. And again, their overall goal here is to safeguard civic space against the overreach of counterterrorism measures.
Right. Charity and Security Network also issued a press release related to a report that was issued by the Civicus Monitor, a global watchdog group that monitors civil rights. The hot item for those of us in the U.S. was that the U.S. was downgraded its civic space rating to obstructed. And the range is from the worst: closed, repressed, obstructed, narrowed, and open. And we slid from what would be number 2 down to number 3. And the issues that were noted was the fact that there's militarized crackdown on protests here in the U.S., escalating repression against pro-Palestine activists, and media freedom being heavily under attack. And they talked about more broadly that civic freedoms are being curtailed in a record number of countries. Civil society is under severe attack. This is according to the report, in 122 of 198 countries and territories. This year's report also saw that ratings changes were for 18 countries, 15 of them downgraded while 3 have been upgraded. And not surprisingly, the handful of countries that are in the best zone tend to be the ones that also, for example, do well in the Basel AML index. Kind of a mindset approach to things in terms of the things that have to be done.
Back here in the States, in New York, the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, has just announced the indictments of 5 people for dozens of crimes related to what they're calling years-long bribery and money laundering schemes to secure favorable contracts from Delta Airlines at RFK Airport. 5 people were charged with bribing Delta employees with approximately $250,000 in cash and trips to Vegas and Atlantic City. Quote from the Attorney General: when businesses bribe their way into lucrative contracts, everyday New Yorkers can suffer the consequences of worse service and higher costs. So again, these are indictments. You can read more about it on their website, just at ag.ny.gov.
John, you had pointed out 2 reports. One was the IRS-CI annual report for 2025, and the other was His Majesty's Treasury, AML, and CTF supervision report for 24-25. You want to start with one of those?
Sure. So on the UK one, again, it's on their website, as all these are. A couple things. They outline the UK system-wide AML CTF performance, their supervisory activity, positions financial crime controls within a broader framework of supervisory intensity. So a couple of things jumped out. There are sections that describe outcome testing that show that the FCA is shifting toward evidence-based assessments of control effectiveness, moving beyond policy and procedural reviews. In addition, looking at risk profiles across sectors, crypto asset firms, continued supervisory challenges there linked to registration and travel rule compliance, wholesale banking, challenges related to correspondent relationships, what they call complex corporate structures. And the report emphasizes the collaboration, which is always important, between FCA, law enforcement, and their intelligence partners. I have not had the chance to jump through the IRS-CI report, but as we've said in the past, these reports are not snapshots. They're great entire reviews of the activity of IRS-CI. We've had the fortune of working with a number of the past CI chiefs. They do list, just jumping through the table of contents, pretty short report actually, but a lot of links to investigations. The significant cases that they reference from 2025 include North Korean Information Technology Scheme, Bitwise Industries out of the Oakland field office, Credit Suisse Services, COVID-19 pandemic fraud, which still continues to haunt all of us, obviously, the TD Bank investigations. And so according to, and Guy Fico, our partner who's been active with the AML Partnership Forum and will continue to be in March, the message from him includes a snapshot of the investigative activities. 11% was done on narcotics, 63%, of course, on tax, and 23.7% investigative time spent on non-tax issues. And then they'll reference in there the global impact of IRS-CI's work. And as we know from talking to Guy and Don and Jim Lee, one of the things that they're most proud of is the work they do with the J5, and that's the activity with CI chiefs from those various other countries, and that's referenced in here. And I guess one more thing, because also another one of our good friends, Lauren Corr, who has been instrumental in making this successful, the work of IRS's CI First. It started in March of this year, and it's the ability of IRS-CI to work with financial institutions around the country. And there's been a number of these CI First events, and they're all been welcomed by the private sector as really an excellent way to continue to share information between the private and public sector.
Glad you mentioned CI First. I think it's a worthy thing. We've talked a lot over the years between industry and government and the need for information sharing, and the CI First process is doing a great job of providing financial institutions with quantifiable results from IRS-CI and how the agency uses SARS to investigate crimes, which helps the industry understand, okay, that's what was valuable. Let's be sure that we're thinking about SARS in the right way to support investigations. FCA in the UK did fine Nationwide Building Society 44 million pounds, about 59 million US dollars, for inadequate anti-financial crime controls. They did not get a proper grip on financial crime risks that were in its customer base and took too long to address the flaws in its system. A building society in the UK is similar to a savings and loan here in the US, where they focus on personal bank accounts and residential mortgages. We're seeing more fines in the UK and the EU. And I think this is just another example that everybody's got to keep their eye on the ball. Last thing I wanted to mention was the OCC has conditionally approved two national bank trust charters, one for Circle and one for Ripple, and they've conditionally approved the applications from three other crypto platforms to convert their state trust banks to national charters. And the reason to do that is that it lets you do business nationwide. These have not been finalized, but it would allow the companies to manage and hold assets on behalf of customers and settle payments faster. These charters, and I think we talked about this last week, these types of charters do not allow the companies to accept deposits or make loans. So that's the limited purpose nature of the charter.
Elliot,
John,
just right before we recorded, Trump has just announced a complete blockade of sanctioned oil tankers to Venezuela, and they are naming Maduro and the government of Venezuela a foreign terrorist organization.
And yesterday, the administration, I think it was an executive order, but I'm not sure, that designated fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah, it is an executive order.
John, I know you and I have already recorded two special editions of This Week in AML, one to post the day after Christmas and one to post on the 2nd of January. So this will be our last regular one, and then we'll be back on the 9th. Anything else in the hopper that you want to talk about?
Yes. So there's, this week we have our webinar reviewing global financial crime for the year. And so by the time you hear this, it'll happen, but recordings will be available after that at some point. So that's one. I interviewed Sarah Beth Felix a week or so ago. That's going to post next week. And that's always an interesting conversation with somebody who's got their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the AML community. We are efforting a couple of other podcasts for early in 2026. And as always, if you're interested in a topic, want to hear from a speaker, whatever it might be, let either of us know. We'd be happy to pursue that.
Well, John, you have a good rest of the day. I'm actually going to see you this evening. If you're sitting on the couch and you're tired of football, I think our two special editions are worth a listen. And we're excited to be back with you in 2026.
Yes. Happy holidays, everybody. Please stay safe.
Yep. You too, Jim. Bye.